presentations I have prepared from different sources, from some of the research papers, from some book, or from some of the literature available. So these are my thoughts basically. Some of the thoughts are my thoughts. So don't consider these as a standard guideline. So I have divided this entire 1.5 hour lecture into 3 parts. In the first part, we are going to discuss about the introduction to blockchain technology. I believe that in this particular short-term program, many faculty members are from different disciplines. Some are from electronics, some are from electrical background. They are not having the in-depth exposure about the computer science. So it's my duty as a speaker to introduce some of the concepts related to the blockchain technology, and then we are going to discuss in the part 2 of my presentation the consensus protocols for the permissionless environment. And at the last, because this FDP belongs to be the from the Department of Electrical Engineering, so I have selected one case study that in the energy trading, if smart grid as an environment in the energy trading, if you want to use the blockchain technology, then how this blockchain is going to be adopted in the scenario where your application is smart grid and you want to develop a kind of a entire ecosystem for peer-to-peer energy trading management. Okay, so now as in today arena, you believe everyone believe that we have some kind of ranking framework agencies. So that's the way I have kept here the learning objective of this lecture. So I believe that after this lecture, all the participants get a kind of a flavor that what exactly the meaning of blockchain and how the blockchain works, and what are the taxonomy of consensus protocols. And the most important part is, let's say, irrespective of your discipline, whether you are from electronics background or you are from electrical background, blockchain nowadays people are using in every segment of the industry 4.0, irrespective of the discipline. So I can say that if you see the interdisciplinary nature, then blockchain could be a viable solution in any of the vertical with respect to the industry 4.0. So for this particular purpose, as I have already told you, I have included one case study, and this is our own contribution from my own student. So just to start the fundamental part, that what exactly the meaning of blockchain. Before coming to the blockchain, let me clarify certain things. Let's say you are having one document and and the due credit is given to the NPTEL also, because some of the resources I have used from the NPTEL also, and some MOOC courses also. So what is the traditional way of document sharing? Let's say, for example, you are having one document and you want to share this particular document to one of your friends. So one easiest way, if I talk about in terms of the 90s, then you just draft an email, make a kind of attachment, whether your document is in the Word or in the PDF, okay, and make a kind of attachment, and then send it to your friend by using this kind of communication. So sharing the information using this kind of communication, both the user cannot simultaneously update the document at the same time. This is the one of the lacuna of that particular environment. So now, if we see in the present era, let's say if you need to collect the information in your department, you are having 60 faculty members, and you want to collect the information of all 60 members, their name, their mobile number, their email ID, then the office assistant will do simply one thing. He just create a shared spreadsheet and share it with all the faculty member, and the faculty member will just do the entry. So this is another way of document sharing. But in this particular case, both the user can simultaneously edit the document at the same time, okay, which was not earlier in case of the, if we talk about in terms of 80s or 90s, where you can just draft an email, send it to your friend, and your friend will do some kind of editing and then send back to you. So simultaneous updation was not possible. But nowadays, if we talk about in terms of this environment, Google Docs, so we can say both the parties can simultaneously update the document. But as far as the storage capabilities are going to concern, so this particular environment is centralized environment. And now the next question comes, does the centralized system harm? So is there any problem for using the centralized system? Yes. And I add some more complexity to my previous question. Let's say for any of the organization, for any of the user, if bandwidth is a problem, forget about editing the document, even though you are not in a position to open your document and do some kind of editing. Okay, so this is the some of the problems are there in the centralized system as far as the storage is going to concern. So now, what are the lacunas in the centralized system? So there is a single point of failure. So if for a fraction of second, if I assume that there is no sufficient bandwidth available, then how you are in a position to open that particular document and do a kind of editing in the document, or what happen if the server crashes? So these are some of the problems with the centralized systems. So how we are going to handle these problems? So now we will take this as a motivation. So before coming to the exact picture of the blockchain, because interchangeably I am using these two terms, distributed and decentralized. So it's my duty to explain you, because most of you are already aware about these three kind of environment. So first one is the centralized, where we are having a single point of contact. Let me open the pointer so that thing becomes easy for you. So in case of centralized system, we are having a single point of contact. If we are having single point of contact, then because of whatever be the reason, let's say because of some network failure or crash fault, we are not getting the central controller or the central entity fails, then we are not getting your entire networks is in danger. So this is one of the drawback of the centralized system. At the same time, if we compare it with the decentralized system, instead of having the single point of contact as in the case of decentralized system, in case of decentralized system, we are having multiple point of contact. So if we are having multiple point of contact, then what are the benefits that we are going to achieve if we compare it with the centralized system? Let's say I'm just taking example, because of some network failure, because of some crash fault, we are not getting the data from this particular section. Then other point of contacts are available from which we can get the data at a regular interval of time. Okay, so there is network performance degrades, but at the same time your entire network is not in danger. So at the same time, if we compare it with the distributed system, in case of distributed system, every node is connected to every other node, and each node is collectively execute their own job. Okay, so these are the three environment basically. If I talk about in terms of the example perspective, so we can say this blockchain falls under the category of decentralized environment, or your intranet, internet, world wide web, and email. All these are working on the principle of distributed environment. So I'm going to discuss or focus more on the decentralized environment, where instead of having single point of contact, we are having multiple point of contact. Okay. Now moving further, so what could be a possible solution now? Still, I am not getting the answer to my previous questions that if you want to share your document from your side to your friend side, and because if we consider the Google Doc as a medium, then there are some vulnerabilities associated with the sharing of this particular document. Now, what could be a viable solution? So according to me, let's say, for example, if I say that we are not going to replace the internet will remain itself there in order to have the connectivity at both the end. So let's say if we make the internet itself responsible for maintaining the information consistency, because information consistency play an important role for any network. Why? Because whatever updation is already occurred in the document from your receiver side or from other sides, the same are going to be reflected at each and every end. So if it is not there, then what happened? Then this is not a kind of a consistent information. So it is not an updated information. So in this particular environment, if I talk about in terms of making the internet itself responsible for maintaining the information consistency, this is not going to solve our purpose. Why? Number one, internet is an open channel, you know. Second part is, if internet is an open channel, then it gives an invitation to the intruder. Hey, you come and perform some kind of malicious activities over the network. Then the next role comes with the access control mechanism. What kind of access control mechanisms are there in your network? Whether it's a kind of a Kerberos, it's a kind of a biometric, or it's a kind of a password based authentication. So, but in this case, both the user can simultaneously update the document. This was also possible in case of the of a Google shared sheet. Okay, but if I make internet itself responsible, so this medium is not going to solve my purpose as far as the privacy and the security of the data stored data is going to concern. So now, what could be the viable solution? So the viable solution is, let's say, for example, if I make a kind of a decentralized database, okay, among all the stakeholders, I need to frame out a kind of a decentralized database, and that database will provide a strong consistency support. So this is nothing but you have created a peer-to-peer network where each node is connected to every other node, each node, and they have a decentralized database, and this decentralized database is going to maintain the strong consistency. So this is the motivation for using the blockchain. So now, what exactly the meaning of blockchain? So let's say I'm taking a very simple example. Let's say in your class you are having 4 students, and they do not want to take part in the placement activity. They do not want to take part, go for the GATE exam for higher studies or GRE or MAT or CAT. They want to even go for what they need. They want to go for a kind of a opening for a new organization. They want to start their own startup. Then what is the problem? Problem number one is there are 4 friends, but they do not have trust on each other. If there are 4 friends, they do not have trust on each other, and still they want to start their own startup. Then who is responsible to maintain the trust? And believe me, in a real practical scenario, if the person or the business partners are not having trust, and there is no mechanism available to maintain the trust in the entire network, then the thing becomes worst in a very early days of the business. Forget about the progress in the business. So this blockchain is a kind of a technology, or we can say it's a kind of a decentralized platform, which enables basically or provide a kind of a platform to the multiple stakeholders. Those are available in the selected application, who want to coordinate, who want to cooperate, or who want to collaborate in a rational decision making process. Here the rational decision making process means what? They want to start their own startup. So this is the basic definition of blockchain, that it's a kind of a decentralized computation and information sharing platform. Now, I will tell you by taking one very simple example. So let's say in your network, there are 4 persons are available in the network. Let's say person X, person P, person Y, and person Z. Okay. So in order to demonstrate you how this blockchain network works, so let's say, for example, I want to transfer 1,000 rupees from my account to another account. Let's say for a fraction of second, if I take one example, I want to transfer, let's say, $100 from my account to Dr. Tiwari's account. So I have multiple options. I want to do the UPI, or it is the choice is mine. Okay. But I take a very early days example. Let's say, for example, I have an account in Punjab National Bank, and Dr. Tiwari is also having the account in the Punjab National Bank. So I just add the account of Dr. Tiwari, and after a certain period of time, 1 to 2 hours, I am eligible to initiate this particular transaction. So the success of that particular transaction is solely dependent on the payment gateway, which type of payment gateway is used by the bank. Okay, so that means in the normal banking process, the success of a particular transaction is dependent on the trusted third party. That means the third party. So now there is a big question mark on the credibility of the third party. So now come back to this example, where in this particular example we are having 4 person X, person Y, person P, and person Z. Let's say initially everyone is having $100 in their account. Let's say we initiate this process. Person X want to transfer $50 from her account to person Y account. So this is a kind of a transaction between X and Y. Like I want to transfer $50 from my account to Dr. Tiwari's account. So in this particular case, it is a kind of a transaction between 2 persons. Okay, but in normal banking case, we need a kind of a payment gateway, but here there is no requirement of the payment gateway. It's an end-to-end transaction. So now this kind of entry that X has transferred $50 from her account to Y account is going to be reflected in the ledger maintained by each and every node. So see here, X to Y $50, X to Y $50. Although it is not a kind of a transaction, it has nothing to do with P, it has nothing to do with Z. But in order to establish the trust in the network or in your entire environment, this blockchain is going to maintain the distributed ledger. That's the way the transactions that are committed in the blockchain, they are irreversible or tamper proof. Even though once the transactions are committed, you don't have any right to change that particular transaction. Okay. So for what purpose this P and Z will have this kind of transaction? Because later on, Y cannot deny that I have received $50 from X. It is just like a normal passbook, banking passbook you are having, where at any instant of time you can go to the bank and refresh your passbook, and you can see that how much amount is debited, how much amount is credited. Similarly, the blockchain network is using the distributed ledger technology. Okay. Now, if I want to initiate another transaction, let's say person Y want to transfer $30 from his account to person P account. So this is again a transaction between Y and P, but this entry is going to be reflected in the ledger maintained by each and every node, Y to P $30, Y to P $30. Now, this is the beauty of the blockchain, that without the involvement of the third party, you can initiate the transaction. Okay, and every individual node will have the copy of the entire distributed ledger. At any instant of time, in case of problem, this distributed ledger is going to be referred, and you can see that what is going on in the network at any instant of time. Now, let's say if a person X want to transfer $80 from her account to person Z account. So because she has already transferred $50 from her account, so the current balance is $50. So this kind of transaction is not feasible because of insufficient fund. It's the normal banking procedure. So this is the way how this blockchain works. Now I will tell you how the blockchain transactions are started and how they are committed. So with this particular slide, I will tell you that what exactly the life cycle of the blockchain transactions. Let's say you have some transactions that you want to commit into the blockchain. That means you have some data that you want to store into the blockchain. Okay. So this request is to be broadcasted to the entire network. That means in a peer-to-peer way. Okay, in a peer-to-peer fashion, because blockchain is using peer-to-peer network, this request is broadcasted to the entire network. Okay, then the mining procedure will start. What is the mining procedure? That network will pose the challenge that you have to solve this particular problem, and whosoever will solve the problem first, their transactions are added into the blockchain first. Okay, so next question comes, who are going to validate the transaction, who are going to verify the transaction? So in blockchain, we have the separate concept of verification and validation. So the network of nodes validate the transactions based upon the mutual consensus. Okay, so for that particular purpose, we are having a separate class of consensus mechanisms altogether apply for the public blockchain and for the private blockchain. Now, once the transaction is validated, then the transaction is to be verified, and it is to be recorded in the form of a smart contract, which is a kind of a piece of a code which is written in Go Solidity like language, which cannot be altered, and every user will have the copy of the smart contract. Okay, and then once it is verified, then the transaction is combined with the other transactions that are already committed in the blockchain, and the transaction, the new block is added into the blockchain, and that is the permanent and unalterable block which cannot be altered by any of the node. So ultimately, after that, once the block is added into the existing blockchain, the transaction life cycle is completed, and the user will get a notification either on their mobile, whatever medium they want to use, or on email, that your transaction is completed. So this is one kind of iteration, or we can say one kind of life cycle of the blockchain. This process will repeat until we have the transactions that are committed into the blockchain multiple times. Okay. Now, with this particular slide, our observation number one is, once the transactions are committed, no one have the right to change the transactions. That's the way this blockchain technology, we can call it as a tamper-proof mechanism. Okay, so this is the way we can call it as a tamper-proof mechanism. Now I will tell you that why it is called the tamper-proof mechanism by skipping some of the slides. Okay, so now let's say, for example, with this particular slide, this is a very good slide. This will tell you exactly that with respect to the Bitcoin, I am taking example of Bitcoin here. Why you cannot cheat in the Bitcoin, or you can say why there is no possibility, I can say, of having any kind of alteration in the already committed transaction. 100% it is not true. If you have GPUs, if you have high performance computing devices, and you can compute the value of the knowns very faster, then you can do some kind of alteration, but the chances are very less, because nowadays this technology becomes matured day by day. Okay, but if you just Google it, the instances where the people have do some kind of attacks on the entire blockchain or Bitcoin based network, then you will find number of use cases. Okay, so now come back to the PPT, how I can say that this entire blockchain based network is a tamper proof based mechanism. Because let's say I'm just considering an example, everybody in the network is working on adding the block number 91. What does it signify? It signifies that up to block number 90, all the transactions are committed, and everyone in the network is working on adding the block number 91. Okay, everyone in the network is working on adding the block number 91. But in between this, one of the miner whose intention is not right, that miner is basically a kind of a attacker, want to alter any already committed transactions. Or just for your example, just for your explanation purpose, I have selected, let's say, any of the miner or attacker want to change or want to alter or do some kind of modification in the already committed transactions which are available in the block number 74, and everyone is working on adding the block number 91, and one of the miner will want to change some of the already committed transactions that are available on block number 74. Now, how it is not feasible, I will tell you. Because if the person want to make these changes, then the person have to first do the changes and then redo all the changes that are associated, start from the block number 74 up to 90. Because this blockchain using the concept of Merkle root, if you are going to change the root, if you are going to change the leaf, then ultimately leaves are associated with the root, and the entire root hash are going to be changed. So everyone can visualize that something is wrong going on in the network. Okay, so that's the way this gentleman who want to make some kind of alteration on block number 74 has to do his task also, and also redo all kind of computation, start from the block number 74 to 90. That means 18 blocks of expensive computing the attacker need to perform, which is practically not feasible. But if you have GPUs or high performance computing, then the thing becomes easy. Then in order to minimize it, the inventor of the blockchain, they have specified another, that the timestamp is also associated for adding the block 91. Let's say 2-second time is allocated to and given to everyone for adding the block number 91. So that means within 2 seconds, this particular attacker will do the correction, whatever he want to do, and also redo all the corrections, all the hash associated from block number 74 to 90. Okay, but within the time which is allocated for adding the block number 91. So that's the way, these are the reasons why we can say that the blockchain is a kind of a tamper proof mechanism, but not 100%. There are some chances, there are some attacks already exist, or already the attackers have commit some kind of attacks on the blockchain based network. Now moving further, now how many types of nodes are there in the blockchain? So in the blockchain, we are having three categories of node. First one is the miner node. So miner nodes, what is the purpose or role of the miner nodes? So miner nodes are basically responsible for doing some kind of authentication, some kind of authorization, or some kind of auditing the entire transactions that are occurring in the network. Next one is the ledger node. So ledger nodes are used to maintain the history of all the committed transactions, because later on at any instant of time, if someone deny that I have not received this kind of transaction or this kind of transaction is never committed in the network, so this ledger node is going to be referenced at that particular instant of time in order to get the answer to this particular query, whether this particular transaction which the one of the miner is denying that he has not get this kind of transaction or this kind of transaction is not committed. So this is the role of the ledger node. And third category of node is the normal node. So normal node contains the full copy of the complete blockchain. So in blockchain, we are having the concept of replica. So once the last transactions are committed, then the entire database is refreshed, and everyone who are the part of the network will have the refreshed copy of the entire ledger basically. So these are the three categories of node. If I talk about in terms of the formal definition, according to me, blockchain is a kind of a open platform accessible to all the users if you are using the public blockchain. And how we can say blockchain is one of the example of distributed or decentralized system, because at any instant of time there is no single party control, there is no monopoly at all. It is not like that blockchain network is favoring one segment of the user. No, whatever be the computing resources you are having or whatever be the resources you are having, according to that you can take part in the mining procedure. If so, mining procedure will be taken care dependent on the number of Bitcoin you are having, on the basis of number of the amount of resources you are having. So every transaction is verifiable. Why? Because at any instant of time, anyone can check in the network that what is going on in the network, who has transferred what amount to whom, and who is getting money from whom. So everyone can see what is going on in the network at any instant of time, and permanent. But obvious, because it's a tamper-proof mechanism. Once the transactions are committed, you don't have any right to change that particular transaction. And if you want to change the transaction, you have to reinitiate a particular transaction. But there is no right to change any already committed transaction. So if I talk about in terms of the types of the blockchain, so we are having three types of the blockchain. The first category is the public blockchain. What exactly the meaning of public blockchain? Public blockchain means, or we can say it's a permissionless environment. Anyone at any instant of time can join the network. That's the way the access is open. And the private blockchain means what? Within the restricted environment, let's say IBM have their own blockchain, or Microsoft have their own blockchain, or all NITs want to develop their entire separate blockchain. So it falls under the category of federated or consortium blockchain. Let's say NIT want to do that. We are not going to distribute the degree to the student. We are not going to give any kind of fees receipt to the student. Everything is available on the blockchain, and any student can get it having some kind of a unique key. By entering the unique key, all the data is available. So Estonia is a country that using this kind of a paperless kind of environment, where they are not giving any kind of degree certificate to the students. No need to apply for a particular vacancy in a physical form. You just need to give your SSN number, and through that particular number, your employer will get the access to your all data within that particular restrictions which are fixed, like your not exactly the all data, but some rights are given to them that depending upon that the user can see, because this is a big challenge to maintain the security and privacy of the data. So these are the three categories of blockchain. One is the public, second one is the private, and third one is the federated. For this private, we can also call it as a permission blockchain. If I talk about in terms of the transaction speed, that is the per unit time the number of transactions are committed. So the public blockchain is having slow speed, and private blockchain is having lighter and fast. But the federated or consortium is also having lighter and faster speed as compared to the public blockchain, because in case of the reason is, in case of the public blockchain, anyone can join the network at any instant of time. So there is no access control basically. So if I take an example, so Bitcoin and Ethereum, these are the example of public blockchain. Hyperledger is an example of private blockchain, and this Corda and Quorum, these are the example of federated or consortium blockchain. Okay, so this is about the fundamental part of the blockchain. So in this part, we have covered the what exactly the meaning of blockchain. Now in the second part, I am going to discuss about the consensus. So I will tell you in a very simple way what is the role of consensus. And believe me, this irrespective of your discipline, this consensus plays an important role, because if you see from the electrical perspective, from the electronic perspective also, there are some kind of applications where you are having multiple parties, they are fighting for a particular access, number one, or there are some chances of the conflict. Number three, in the environment, there are having multiple stakeholders. So if this is the environment, then in order to reach to a common agreement, we need the concept of consensus. So what exactly the meaning of consensus? I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say in your family, you are having four members, your brother, sister, mother, father. Okay, four members are there. And today night you have to decide that where you want to go for dinner. Let's say all four are having different opinion. Father say we need to go to Punjabi restaurant, mother say we need to go to South Indian restaurant, brother say we need to go to McD, and sister say no, we need to go to Pizza Hut. So all four members are having different opinion with respect to taking the decision for today where we need to go for the dinner. Okay, so think this particular environment where you are having multiple parties, multiple stakeholders, and how you are going to take the decision. This is a big hurdle. So if in your environment this is the case, then blockchain could be a viable solution, and you can use the consensus protocol here. Then the role of consensus protocol comes into the picture. Now, what exactly the meaning of consensus? The consensus means we need to reach to a common agreement. We need to reach to a common conclusion, depending upon some kind of mechanism that we are going to discuss in next few slides. So there is no requirement of consensus. Let's say in your environment, if you are having one decision maker, then there is no need of consensus, because if there are only one person who is going to responsible to take the decision, then why there is a requirement of consensus? There is no requirement, a big no. Now, if you have multiple decision maker in your environment, then if you have multiple decision maker, then for this particular environment, you need to have require the consensus mechanism. Why you need consensus mechanism? In order to reach to a common agreement. Okay, so why we have to use the consensus? I have already described you. Now I will tell you a very simple applications or very common applications. Let's say in Chandigarh airport, multiple flights are heading towards the Chandigarh airport. I again repeat, multiple flights heading towards the Chandigarh airport, and how the Chandigarh airport air traffic control system will decide that which flight is to be landed first, which flight is to be landed second. Consider any segment of time zone. Let's say, for example, 1 to 2, there are 15 flights that are heading towards the Chandigarh. Okay, they are reaching to Chandigarh within a span of, let's say, next 30 minutes. Now, how the air traffic control system will decide that the flight 1 will be landed first, or flight of Air India will be landed first, or flight of any other airline will be landed first? So in this particular environment, and altogether, they need to, the air traffic control system need to coordinate their positions also among themselves. Okay, so based upon this particular, if this is the problem, or we can call this problem as the flight control system. So in this particular environment also, the air traffic control system also using the concept of consensus, or sometimes some other concept of prioritizing also. And nowadays they are also using some kind of a monetary kind of or financial model also for this particular purpose. But consensus can also play an important role in this particular environment. Another application, very renowned application, the leader election or mutual exclusion problem. This is a very common problem in blockchain. Let's say multiple candidates are contesting for a particular assembly, in a particular assembly, for in assembly elections. Okay, now which candidate you want to declare a winning candidate, or you can say this candidate is the winning candidate. Whosoever will get the higher percentage of vote, this particular candidate is to be declared as a winning candidate from the election commission side. So based upon the majority principle, so based upon the majority voting function basically. So this majority voting function is nothing but it's a consensus mechanism. Okay. So now moving further, so that part we have discussed. Now, before moving to the next part, I will tell you before moving to the consensus mechanism, how the consensus mechanism work. Let me just describe you some of the fault that exist in the distributed consensus with respect to the permission environment. First one is the crash fault. So what exactly the meaning of this crash fault? I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say, for example, I have deployed 100 sensors to monitor the temperature of this particular room. Okay, and for whatever be the reason, I am not getting the data from sensor number 32, sensor number 76. I am just roughly quoting some IDs. So it practically happens that because of some network failure, because of some crash fault, because of some network failure, or because of some link or poor connectivity, I'm not getting the data from these two sensors. But over a period of time, there are a good chances that they may recover, and we are getting the data from these two sensors or any one of the sensor. So this category of fault in the blockchain, we can call it as a crash fault. Now, next one is the network or partition fault. I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say initially you are having 100 nodes. You have deployed the 100 node. And let's say because of some network failure, this 100 node, there is one link between the node number 32 and 33. Okay, this breaks because of some kind of network failure. So that means your initially this network is having single network. This network is a single network having 100 nodes. Because of this reason, the network is partitioned into two different sub networks. So if this is the problem, so this problem we can call it as a network or partition fault, in which your single network partition into multiple network, and yes, there is no connectivity among these sub networks. So this kind of problem we can call it as a network or partition fault. Next one is the Byzantine fault. So Byzantine fault is very tedious in the blockchain to handle. I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say, for example, in your network, you have placed some access control mechanism like, okay, and you have checked the authenticity of the user, whether the user is authorized to take part in your network or not. But in real sense, in practical aspect, it happens multiple times that after the authentication process is over and users started behaving maliciously. I again repeat, after the authentication process is over, users started behaving maliciously, then it is very tedious to handle this particular environment. So that's the way this environment in the blockchain, we can call it as a Byzantine fault, or very rare to handle this particular fault. So in order to handle this particular fault, we are having a separate class of consensus protocol that we can call it as a practical Byzantine fault tolerance and Byzantine fault tolerance. Now moving further, so I will tell you now I'm going to discuss only about the important consensus protocol, start from the proof of work, proof of stake, proof of burn, and proof of lapse time. These four we are going to discuss, and then we are shifting to the case study. Okay, so in case of, let's say, for example, the probability of proof of work based consensus mechanism is low. Why? Because initially it is very difficult to say that which miner will be able to generate the block. So let's say in your environment you are having 50 node, and we can say some challenge is posed by the network, and every miner is trying to solve this particular challenge. Okay, so now initially you cannot predict that who will be the winner, who have the solution to this particular problem. So that's the way we can say the probability of getting proof of work is very low, because no miner will be able to control the entire Bitcoin based network at any instant of time single handedly. Ideally, this will not happen. And this proof of work, we can also call it as a Nakamoto consensus. Why? Because this consensus protocol was coined by the Satoshi Nakamoto. That's the way in the literature. If you refer the research paper, you will find that this proof of work based consensus mechanism is also called the Nakamoto consensus. It uses some of the basic cryptographic primitives that SHA-256 has function it is going to use in order to encrypt the data. Now, I will tell you why the Bitcoin proof of work is tamper proof. Let's say in this particular slide, I have considered only some fragment of the blockchain. So inside the blockchain, we are having multiple blocks, and inside the block we are having multiple transactions. I again repeat, in the blockchain we are having multiple blocks, and inside the block we are having multiple transactions, and each transaction will have its own hash. Okay, so why? Because blockchain is going to maintain the privacy of the user also. Let's say you want to use the blockchain in the healthcare environment. So as a patient, I do not want to disclose my disease, my telephone number, or my address. For what purpose I need to disclose it? So this blockchain network call the user not by their name, it call the user by the hash. So that's the way the privacy of the user is maintained. You have transferred, let's say, X to Y. So it is not X to Y basically in the previous example that so far we have discussed. The X is known by the hash ID and Y is known by the hash ID. So every node is in the blockchain network is known by the encoded ID, not by the name. That's the way the privacy of the user is to be maintained in the blockchain based network. Now coming to this PPT, why the Bitcoin proof of work is tamper proof. So inside the block we are having the previous hash, the timestamp. Timestamp means what? How much time is allocated in order to commit that particular transaction associated with block number 22. What is the difficulty level, that we can call it as a nonce, or the transaction root, or we can say the Merkle root. So every block contains the previous hash and the current hash. This is the hash of the block number 23, and this is the hash of the block number 22. That's the way it connect. It uses the concept of data structure linked list. So let's say from the attacker perspective, if I think the attacker want to attack, let's say in block number 23, so attacker need to perform more work as compared to all the work performed as a consolidated by all the stakeholders. Okay, that's the way the attacker can gain the access. So this is difficult with the current hardware, I can say, but not impossible. If the attacker can do work by investing a huge hardware, or attacker may have a kind of a high performance computing devices or GPU processors available which can compute this hash value very fast, and will be able to change the hash value of all the blocks in the blockchain, then thing becomes easy. Okay, but it is very difficult, not possible, because nowadays this technology is matured. Okay, now moving further, there is one another problem in the blockchain network that we can call it as a double spending problem. What exactly the meaning of double spending problem, I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say, for example, this particular gentleman is having 10 Bitcoin in his account, and he want to initiate two different transactions of 10 Bitcoin simultaneously at the same time. And he is authorized to make a transaction of 5 Bitcoin or 7 or whatever he want to use, but not more than 10 Bitcoin, because he is having 10 Bitcoin in his account. So if we do like that, this kind of problem in blockchain, we can call it as a double spending problem. So this proof of work solve the double spending problem here. Why? Because once the transactions are committed, they are irreversible. So computationally, it is impractical to modify the transactions. Every transaction can be validated against the existing blockchain. So to make the system tamper proof, the proof of work ensure that double spending not occurred in your entire environment. Now, let's say, for example, what are the problems, because we have already discussed about the proof of work based system. So proof of work based system works only about the basis of how much computing resources the miner will have. So whatever be the computing resources you are having, according to that computing resources, you can take part in the mining procedure. Or computing resources in terms of what? In terms of CPU, in terms of memory utilization. So this proof of work depends on the computing resources available to the miner. So the miner having high computing resources or more computing resources, the probability that their transactions are added into the blockchain is much more higher as compared to the other. So if we are following this kind of principle, this is not a kind of a fair business basically. Let's say in your network you are having 100 users and 5 users are having high performance computing devices. So in every round their transactions are added into the blockchain. Then for what purpose these rest 95 users are taking part in the mining procedure? So this is not a kind of a fair problem. Okay, so that's the way this monopoly is a kind of a problem in the proof of work based system. Okay, and the worst part is this monopoly will increase round by round. Let's say I waited for, let's say, first round. I wait for the first round, my transactions are added into the blockchain. No. In the second round, no. In the third round, no. So now, for what purpose I take part in the mining procedure? It is a kind of a, over a period of time, it discourages the miners to take part in the mining procedure. So that problem, we can call it as a monopoly problem in the proof of work based system. So that's the way this reward concept will come into the picture in blockchain, that you have take part in the mining procedure. So some amount of Bitcoin is given to you because you have consumed your resources, although you have not win in this particular round, but still the network is going to allocate some kind of Bitcoin to the user because you have consumed your resources. So another problem is the power consumption problem with proof of work based system, because they are power hungry, because the proof of work based consensus are dependent on the computing resources. So that's the way this particular protocol is a power hungry protocol. Now, how these two problems, that the power hungry and the monopoly problem, is taken care. So a separate class of consensus protocol, that we can call it as a proof of stake based protocol, was developed. So this proof of stake based protocol, what exactly in this, in case of proof of work, I just recall, the mining is dependent on whatever be the computing resources the miner will have. But in case of proof of stake, this proof of stake will overcome the problem of the monopoly which was there in the proof of work based system. How? Because proof of stake based system believes that whatever be the amount of stake you are having, stake means whatever be the Bitcoin you are having, according to that you can take part in the mining procedure. Let's say, for example, you are having 5% of the Bitcoin, so you can mine only 5% of the proof of stake block, not more than that. So that's the way. Let's say you are having 10% of the Bitcoin of the entire network, so you can take part only 10% time your transactions are added into the blockchain. So this is the way how this monopoly problem, which was there in the proof of work based system, is resolved by using the proof of stake based system. So now, how the proof of stake based system works, that I have already told you. But if I need to compare it, let's say from the perspective of attacker, if I need to explain it, let's say you need to execute an attack using proof of stake based system. So executing an attack using proof of stake based system is expensive. Why it is expensive? Because here ultimately the mining is dependent on the stake. Stake means in terms of the, let's say, for example, Bitcoin. So attacker, if want to gain the access of their entire network, then attacker need to invest the more Bitcoin. If the attacker want to invest, so ultimately this will reduce the incentive for the attacker, because the attacker need to own a majority of the Bitcoin, and this is the only way the how the attacker can gain the access, which is not feasible for the assessor attacker. Okay. Now the next class of consensus protocol is very familiar protocol, is a proof of burn. So here how this proof of burn work, I will tell you in a very simple way. The miner should show a proof that they have burned some coin. So here the miner have to burn a coin in the mining procedure. So burning means what? That you have spent some coins to a verifiable unspendable address where no one will be able to spend the Bitcoin. If I need to compare it with the proof of work based system, so it is expensive just like proof of work. But in case of proof of burn, no physical resources are used if I need to compare it with the proof of work. In case of proof of work, physical resources like CPU, memory utilization, these all are to be consumed. But in case of proof of burn, only the digital resources are to be used in the form of Bitcoin. So attacker have huge loss of Bitcoin here also. So if I need to compare, let's say, for example, this proof of work based system are more power efficient. How can I say that this proof of burn based system is more power efficient? Because you are utilizing the external resources or the physical hardware. Okay, you are not utilizing the physical hardware in the form of the currencies. You are only spending the digital currencies that is in the form of Bitcoin. So that's the way we can say that this particular proof of burn based consensus protocol, which is to be used in the permission environment, is power efficient if I need to compare with the proof of burn. So this slide will tell you the exact difference between the proof of stake, proof of work, proof of burn. And I will advise you, all of you, that irrespective of your area, think the possibility, if you are having multiple stakeholders available in your application area in which you are working or willing to start your work, see the possibilities. Is there any chances to apply the any kind of consensus mechanism in your defined application area? Okay, so proof of work is in case of proof of work, the mining is dependent on the computing resources. In case of proof of stake, the mining is dependent on the amount of Bitcoin you are having. In case of proof of work, the mining is dependent on the Bitcoin rather than the physical currencies to participate in the mining procedure. Now, the last consensus protocol is the proof of elapsed time. So this proof of elapsed time was coined by the Intel as a part of their Intel blockchain environment. Or this environment, if you refer the literature, we can also call it as a Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is a kind of a, not a company or not even a kind of a blockchain. It's a kind of a basically a consortium, which is a blockchain platform basically for building some kind of decentralized distributed applications. So what is the basic idea how this proof of elapsed time work? So let's say, for example, initially you are having 50 node in your network, and each node, let's say, waited for some random amount of time. Okay, let's say we waited for, let's say, for 5 seconds that someone else is going to propose their idea. Okay, so the first participant finish this waiting time first is the participant whose transactions are to be added into the blockchain first. But there is one problem associated with this protocol, that simultaneously at the same time, if more than one person claiming that yes, I have waited, let's say, for 120 seconds, someone else has already claimed that I have also waited for 120 seconds. So it is very tedious to believe that which one is telling a lie or which one is telling truth. So for this particular purpose, Intel, this is a kind of a challenge, that how will you verify the proposer has really waited for, say, let's say, some random amount of time. So earlier Intel developed this as a software control program. Okay, so if it is a software control program, then they feel that it is very tough to because from the attacker point of view, attacker can do some kind of alteration in the program and claim that he has waited for, let's say, for 120 second or whatever time is feasible. Okay, so then Intel came up with a new CPU instruction set that they can call it as a SGX basically, which is a kind of a trusted execution platform, which is not software control, which is a hardware code basically, where you can write your code. So if this is a kind of a hardware environment is there, so it is hardware control, not software control. So the trust parameter is more if it is a hardware control rather than only the software control. If I talk about in terms of the applicability of the proof of elapsed time, so this proof of elapsed time work for both the permissionless as well as the permission environment. Permissionless means the public environment, or permission means the private environment. But proof of work, proof of burn, or proof of stake, they are primarily used for the permissionless environment when my environment is open environment. Okay, so this is about the consensus protocol. This is the end of my second part of my presentation. So I am just going to give you a kind of a brief. In the second part, we have discussed about why there is a need of consensus in the blockchain, and how will we categorize the consensus protocol. This list is very long because of shortage of time. I have not kept some protocol related to the permission environment, because for the permission environment we have a separate class of consensus protocol that start from the Raft, then Paxos, then Byzantine fault tolerance, practical Byzantine fault tolerance, different variant of Paxos. Okay, so now I am going to take one case study, and I believe that this case study is an eye-opening for you. Let's say, because I believe that many of the participants are from the electrical or electronic background. So because I belong to be from the computer science background, so we see this particular case study from the perspective of basically computer professional, not from the perspective of electrical and electronic professional. So this is a different perspective. So in this particular, this case study was framed out by my student. Okay, so this paper has already been published in Infocom, one of the top tier conference having H index more than 200. Okay, very recent paper. In this paper, we have framed out a case study where the application is the smart grid, and we have framed out a peer-to-peer smart contract-based secure energy trading. So if you need to do the energy trading and your application is smart grid, then how you need to frame out the, because in energy trading you are having multiple stakeholders. If you are having the multiple stakeholders, then you need to resolve the conflict. If you want to resolve the conflict, then you have to come up with a kind of a MOU, which is not a kind of a traditional MOU. So for this particular case, we have used the concept of smart contract. Okay, and use the entire ecosystem for the, and this protocol, this scheme we have called it as a ET deal. Now moving further, what is the so this is the publication related to this particular paper. And if you publish the paper, let's say in a very renowned conference, or that too in a catchy technology, then you see that it's a very 2020 paper and 171 full views related to this particular paper. Now, what is the motivation for doing this case study? As you know that energy is going to be a kind of a driving force, not only with respect to smart city, but the different aspects of the smart city also, irrespective of, let's say, from the manufacturing point of view, from the banking or financial side, or from the transportation side, or any other side also. So if you see some kind of statistics, then India is at the third place in the energy production and consumption. And the energy demand of India, if you see, it is going to be a very, very tough task for us how to fulfill this particular demand by 2020. According to one of the survey by one agency, it's going to be 1,894 approximately terawatt. Okay, so this is a big challenge how we are going to fulfill this particular energy related demand. And there is again shortfall of 0.7% of power supply during the peak hours, because in India we don't follow the concept of peak hour and off peak hour, but in developed country they are following the peak hour and off peak hour kind of environment. So now what are the problems that are associated, and we took these problems as a challenge. In smart grid, if you say the management of electricity by the traditional power grid is a quite challenging task. So if I come to before coming to the smart grid, if I take a traditional grid, then for traditional grid it is a very, very challenging task how to manage the demand response from the demand side and the supply side. So DRM itself is a big challenge how they are going to maintain. But although we have not touched this DRM aspect in this particular paper, for that aspects we have written another paper. So basically, this power grid distributes the electricity to the consumers without knowing their needs sometimes, which leads to difficulties in terms of what? Difficulties in terms of sometimes we are having some kind of surplus energy to a particular segment. It's a wastage of energy, and sometimes we are having some kind of shortfall or not according to the demand of electricity in some kind of particular region. So it's not a kind of a win-win situation from the supplier side also, or from the end consumer side also. So to overcome these issues, the traditional grid should become smart, and that we can call it as a smart grid. So smart grid with the uses of smart meters, with the uses of Internet of Things related technology like sensors, controllers, and actuators, they are to be used in the smart meters. And by making the use of advanced communication systems, the smart grid is going to be a kind of a viable solutions to generate, transmit, and distribute the electricity efficiently. Now, this is we took as a challenge. Now, how this energy trading comes into the picture? What exactly the meaning of energy trading? So, a smart grid system offers many services to the end users, such as load management, load forecasting, and energy trading. So, out of these services, we have selected only the energy trading, because as per our understanding, there is a lot of scope available for you to work in the energy trading. So energy trading means it's a buying, selling, and moving of energy. So moving of energy means what? from where it is produced to the to where it is needed, basically from to the end user. So normally the traditional smart grid systems offers a centralized platform, and in our presentation also we have seen there are some lacunas associated with the centralized system. If we follow the centralized system in the energy trading environment, what are those? So in terms of the performance, if we compare the computation and the communication cost, latency and reliability of the traditional centralized smart grid, then it degrades as we are going to increase the energy trading request from the number of clients. The moment you are having more number of requests for the energy trading, then your system performance degrades in terms of the latency, in terms of the reliability, and in terms of the entire costing analysis in terms of the communication and computation cost. So although there are many kind of literature exist, many types of literature exist in the already exist, but when we framed out this case study, these solutions are not adequate to handle the security. So these literature, they are not sufficient to or adequate, I can say, handle the security and privacy or the latency or real-time, sometime real-time settlement of the energy trading. So we took these as a motivation. We believe that blockchain could be a viable solution here, because in the energy trading environment, we are having multiple stakeholders and they are competing for a novel cause. All okay, and they want to take part in the energy bidding process, energy trading process. So we use the blockchain in this particular environment, which is a kind of a laser. Okay, so it reduces the overall maintenance cost and increases the data consistency and security. So we have framed out the smart contract among the different stakeholders in the Solidity language and using the Ethereum platform. So basically these smart contracts are self-executable and self-verifiable programming constructs. So without any human intervention, they execute itself. I will tell you in a very simple way. Let's say I have, we four friends want to start our own company, and we have just go to the court and make a kind of a MOU that these are the rules that we are bound to follow. Let's say for whatever be the reason, I am just taking an example, any of the for among any one of the partner not started behaving differently and say that no, I do not want to take part in this, you just give me my money back. So there is a kind of a dispute. Then you have to go to the court, and court will take their own time in order to process your request. So that means for getting the justice, you need to rely on the third party. But if you want to use the blockchain network, then in this particular case, this smart contract is a kind of a understanding document which is to be maintained in a form of a code, and this is executed based upon the milestones, based upon the rules that you have fixed up or agreed upon by all the stakeholders, and without any human intervention, it executes, it transfer the money from your account to the from financer account to your account, and if certain deliverables are not achieved, it debited the amount from your account and back credited to the supporter account, to the financer account. This is the beauty of the smart contract. Now moving further, so what are the research contributions that we have fixed up for this particular case study? So there is a requirement to design a secure smart contract for the decentralized, not centralized, decentralized energy management in the smart grid system. There is a requirement to design a unique data access control mechanism based upon the IPFS based mechanism. This is a very a new kind of data storage, which is a kind of a off-chain data storage flexibility. This is interplanetary file system, which is to be used in order to provide low latency and high throughput, especially in the smart grid environment. So if you just Google it, you will find number of uses of IPFS based system, because you want to store your data and in the form of the off-chain, and data whenever I need that particular data, then data is to be fetched by using some kind of hashing mechanisms. Okay. And third objective we framed out for this particular case study is there is a requirement to design a system. That system facilitate the electric vehicle owner to charge their EVs by buying energy from the nearby prosumer. prosumer here we have treated who are interested in selling the energy. Sometime you also become the prosumer because you have your vehicle available and you do not want to commute your vehicle, let's say for next 15 months or let's say next 15 days. So you are also interested in selling the energy. So that's the way we can say you are also one of the prosumers sometime. So these are the objectives that we have framed out. Now, after that, the purpose scheme, for the purpose scheme, we have framed out the smart contract based upon the Ethereum smart contract and using the IPFS based mechanism for the off-chain based mechanism for the data storage. So ultimately, why we have used these two? The reason is because they manage the energy load of the residential houses, industries, and electric vehicles very efficiently. And whenever there is a kind of a requirement, then only we can fetch that particular data. So there is no requirement to have the all-time data storage. And once you have framed out the smart contract, then the next question comes that is there any kind of security threat available on your developed smart contract? So in order to get the answer of this question, we have we have performed the vulnerability assessment of the smart contract that we have developed for this decentralized energy trading mechanism using the Mythril. Mythril is a kind of an open source tool. In this tool, you pass your smart contract and it will give you Boolean answer whether your smart contract having some kind of vulnerabilities associated with the smart contract or not. Okay, and depending upon that, you can fine tune your smart contract and again pass it to the Mythril. Now, this is the system model of the case study. So from this system model, I will tell you that entire data we have captured from the energy generation sources. Okay, and this data is going to be transmitted. For the transmission, we have different segment like energy distribution, then the energy distribution using the different mode of, and for the storage, we are having some kind of storage devices also. Okay. So ultimately, for this particular case, the entire system architecture is divided into three layers. The first layer belongs to be the smart grid layer. Second layer belongs to be the communication layer, and third layer belongs to be the prosumer and consumer layer. So the entire data is on the basis of requirement is fetched from the IPFS. We are not going to store we have not stored the entire data on the blockchain because otherwise it's a costly affair. So we have stored the data on the IPFS, and whenever the requirement is there, we can fetch the data from the IPFS. Okay, and if you want to refer more, all the descriptions are given in the paper. So I will do one thing. I will email this paper to the organizer. They will send it to all of you. Now we have done the, as I have already told you, that we have done the security verification of the for this particular scheme also by using Mythril. Okay, so Mythril will give you this kind of a code that either the analysis was completed successfully, no issues were detected. Otherwise, it will display the message that against these attacks, your developed smart contract is having some kind of issues. Then you need to revisit it, you need to code it, and again you have to pass it. Unless and until you are getting this kind of message, you cannot proceed for deployment of your smart contract. Because why? Because if the smart contract are deployed, then you don't have any kind of flexibility to change the smart contract, because the smart contract then freezed and everyone is having the copy of the smart contract. Then the change or smart contract is also immutable. So that's the way you have to check the vulnerabilities associated with the smart contract prior to the deployment of the smart contract in the selected application. Now for the performance evaluation, we have considered three parameters: latency, the storage cost, and the scalability. So now I will take one by one. So for the latency, according to us, the latency definition, we have fixed up here the number of transactions committed per unit time. Okay, and we have compared this using two scenario, because one is the LTE based kind of network and second one is the 5G enabled tactile internet. So for these two environment, we have checked and we found that the latency of the proposed scheme is relatively low as compared to the LTE based traditional approaches. So because it uses the tactile internet based feature, because ultimately now the research is going on in this direction that how you are going to reduce the delay, because everyone is expecting the delay should be less than 1 millisecond. Practically, it is not feasible, but everyone is going to do research in this particular environment that how this round trip latency is to be minimized less than 1 millisecond. Okay. Now, second parameter, we have compared the storage cost because we have used the IPFS off-chain based storage cost medium here. Because if I'm going to use the traditional Ethereum based smart contract approach, then the data storage on the blockchain itself is very costly affair. So to avoid this particular case, we have used the IPFS based mechanism, which is a kind of a distributed platform which provides the off-chain flexibility to you to store your data, and whenever you require that particular data related to the energy trading, it fetch from the by using the hash functions. Okay. Now, it clearly indicates that as far as the storage cost is going to concern, if we need to compare it with the blockchain itself, it is going to be very, very less if we have used the IPFS. Third and last parameter, we have used the scalability. Scalability here means what? When the number of mined block increases, then what will be the impact on the transaction time, that is in millisecond. So we have seen that the system itself provides us the improved scalability. The reason behind it is because we have used the Ethereum-based smart contract, okay, and we have used the ultra high reliability, and we can say 99%, 99.9% reliability and ultra low latency because of the usage of this 5G enabled tactile internet with the help of MATLAB. Okay, so now this is about the case study. Now I will conclude the case study. So with the usage of Ethereum smart contract and IPFS eliminates the need of the third party, which is according to us is a kind of a big hurdle. If there is a kind of integrity is a question mark on the third party side. The communication latency is quite low as far as the proposed scheme is going to concern. The performance of the proposed scheme is better in terms of the traditional smart contract if we compare on the basis of two parameters, the data storage cost and the latency. Scalability of the proposed scheme, ET deal, energy trading deal is also improved. So, so these are some of the references. Now I am just concluding within 5 minutes. Before concluding, let me just give a glimpse of in our lab related to blockchain. We have contributed a couple of good case study. One is on the adoption of blockchain in the autonomous vehicle, where we have given a floated idea related to how you are going to. Why I am discussing this, because this will clear your understanding that it is not like that you belongs to mechanical, you belongs to electrical, electronics, and blockchain has nothing to do in this area. If you just Google it, you will find also the people are using the blockchain in the all verticals of the industry 4.0. But the reason you know first that why you want to use blockchain here, then only it is going to help you. Otherwise, if you are going to use blockchain because it's a kind of a fascinating word, then this is not going to help you, because the costing analysis you also need to do. So these are some of the recent publications. It's also from the JPDC journal, where we have taken the energy cloud management as a perspective, and we have do a kind of amalgamation of blockchain and AI. And this paper is a very good paper related to the, because it in this particular paper we have I think selected more than 6 applications, different verticals of industry 4.0, and we have explored performed in-depth analysis of blockchain adoption. And these are more papers, so I'm not taking much time on it. So lastly, I want to say that let's say if you want to plot a graph in which your x-axis represent your situations and y-axis represents your outcome, then the graph of a wise person would have high overall peak, and the graph of a smart person would have high peak. So in research, we don't require high peak all the time. We need to work very hard. Okay. So last word to say from my side, if anything I have said seems useful to you, I am happy. If not, don't worry, just forget all about it. This was said by Honorable Dalai Lama, but in my context, I have changed it. If I have said, if anything I have said seems useful to you, I am happy. If not, don't worry. Soon all becomes necessity for all of us because of the rapid change in the technology. in the present era where we cannot sit silently. Okay, so thank you very much once again to the organizer for giving me this opportunity to share my views related to the blockchain technology. And thank you to Dr. Tiwari, and thanks to the organizer for organizing these workshops, because these workshops are highly required in order to for the faculty member, for the student and other community, in order to grasp the knowledge what is going on in the network. Okay. So thank you very much. Now I am just stop sharing here.